Welcome, new and returning artists. I'm Wyatt Paints, and this week we're getting spooky. My longtime horror fan client has asked me to print and paint a pretty show-stopping Demogorgon statue from Stranger Things. Now, I may not be a fan of all things scary, but so long as I can draw inspiration from my nightmares, I should be fine. And thankfully, I don't think I'll have to use too much inspiration because this statue is big and just dripping with details. But that does mean we're gonna have to put in some extra work on this one, so we should get cracking. But before we do that, I'd like you to say hi to a couple of interns that I brought into the studio. Shadow and Snacks, my furry little potatoes. You might catch these two cuties popping in on camera every now and then, so be prepared. Now with those introductions out the way, meet me over at the painting table. I'll grab my brushes so we can get started. To get going, I have this tangle of tentacles and gore spewing from the upside down. And yeah, it has a significant seam right down the middle that I chose not to fill. The way this statue layers the details and the clever part cutting, it'll go completely unnoticed. The first hue on our color voyage is Chaotic Red. Here, I don't really want a typical base layer that's opaque. I want a good 30 to 40% of the black prime to be visible through. This will add a lot of depth to the viscera. To pull it off, I'm using a well-diluted overbrush technique with a floofy brush. The dilution is going to force me to have to build this color up over multiple passes, leading to a more organic look as the high points get full intensity while the drop off to the shadow averages out. And the floofy brush is important here. The extra give in the bristles means they have an easier time laying down to glide over the details. Stiff bristles would work a lot more of the paint down into them than I want. Next, I blended up a highlight of Wyvern Fury at about 50-50. Still working with a diluted overbrush, I'm repeating the same technique, except for this time I'm focusing my strokes towards the bottom, leaving as little pressure as I can to barely graze the model. My goal is to keep the general gore nice and dark by only highlighting the peaks sparingly, while giving the tentacles full highlights to help separate them from the mass. Speaking of which, it's time for some pure red blended in with the wyvern to up those shades on the tentacles a couple of steps lighter. Here, a stiff bristle comes in handy to make sure I get a lot more precision. Next, it's time for an old favorite, Blood for the Blood God. I have yet to find a decent replacement for this, as when it dries, it has this gorgeous sticky sheen to it. And applying it as a stipple here is really going to turn up the organic look by leaving little random blood chunks here and there. Now moving on to the first of several base props, I have this broken nail bat, which is going to be a cinch to handle. First off, some ancient tree. A solid opaque base will serve as a perfect shadow tone. I followed that up with Wasteland Clay and a medium dry brush. The scratchiness I'm getting won't be a problem. So long as the direction of the stroke is maintained, it's going to build up a fine grain. Couple that with the sculpted macro grain, and this bat is going to be looking the part in no time. Also, as a pro tip here, the floofy brush comes in clutch again for getting around those nails without having to change my stroke angle. The only hard part about this step is ensuring both halves are even to each other. Other than that, it's pretty easy sailing. Next, I pulled out some Baron Dune to quickly highlight the broken ends of the bat, as these would be fresh break wood and significantly brighter. But only just a few dabs, I don't want to flood out all those shadow details. For these nails, each got a quick reset back to black and then detailed with a light dry brush of gunmetal to shine them up. At this point, it's a good idea to switch back to the stiff bristle brush on account of the extra control, and it won't take long before this bat starts looking dangerous. Next up is this bike tire, which is going to be super simple, especially since I still have the gunmetal out to chrome up the rim and spokes. But don't forget to dig deep and get those inner spokes as well. Just don't stress if you can't get the same coverage as you do on the top ones. They should be in shadow anyways. Follow this up with a bit of black to reset the tire. While usually it's a rule not to use pure black, in this case I'm breaking it. This is because the base is going to be plenty dark, and if I want this tire to read as black, it kinda needs to be black. Plus I plan on giving it a bit of a highlight, so it should be fine. Speaking of that highlight, deep gray is it as a super light dry brush along the treads. Be sure to give it a few swipes from the sidewalls to get the edges of the tread. Just be careful not to overspill on the metallics, or else that gray will dull it up pretty fast. Now, I noticed some pitting on the rim while I was chroming it up, so it was time to pull out some dirty down rust and a few dabs for weathering. But I'm gonna keep this pretty reserved as the position of the tire will make most of this pretty hard to see. But this nail bat, on the other hand, is pretty front and center, so a bit of rest on all the nails is in order. But less is definitely more here. Let's not overdo it. Moving up the statue, we now have this large rock with Christmas lights, so I'm starting it off with a deep gray base. While I could paint this rock any number of colors, I'm going with a generic gray for a few reasons. There's already a lot of fantastical things going on in the statue, and being a very typical rock sort of grounds it. And I don't want a warm rock here like a brown, as it would bland down the fleshy base. And a cool bluish rock would make it look a bit too busy and clash with the Christmas lights. So a neutral gray it is. The bonus is, it's going to act kind of like a buffer zone between the Demogorgons and the fleshy bottom. Now, while I want the rock to be a neutral gray, I want it to have lots of depth in its shadows. So I diluted some black ink and gave the entire rock a few all over washes. And if you've never worked with inks, be sure to really shake the heck out of them. Getting a chunk in your ink is the worst. With everything dry, it's time to come back with deep gray. This time as a medium dry brush to re-establish the mid-tone color. You kind of want this to take some time as you ease the color back in, catching every edge and brightening up the raised flats. If you had any weird pooling with the ink, you can use this dry brush to blur away any of those unnatural shapes. Just keep it light. As a final highlight, we're jumping to ash gray and a very big floofy brush. For this highlight, there's two important factors to remember. First off, I want to make sure I catch every single edge of the top surface by changing my stroke angle often, but no circles. And second, when I get to the sides, all my strokes will only go down, even if I'm going to miss some few edges. This is going to help reinforce those areas as being shadows and establish the direction of our light. For these Christmas lights, I'm giving the wire a base of cryptgraph and then a light highlight in Guardian Green to thread the needle on the cables. Then, each bulb got a primary base and highlight followed by a gloss coat to capture that classic 80s Christmas look. The final prop on the base is Dustin's tricolor trucker hat. No need to complicate things here. I just started with the lightest panel and worked my way to the dark using colors I already had on my palette, with the only exception being Brigade Gray as the peak highlight of my white area. Sorry for taking a break from the painting, but I'd like to take a moment to thank my subscribers over on Patreon. And from now on, I've decided to break down the walls that segregate all my wonderful supporters. Each one of these names represented a person that went above and beyond to help support the channel. These are true champions of the craft and pillars of the community. If you would like to join the Painting Pantheon, you'll find a link to my Patreon below. You can also support the channel right here on YouTube with a like and comment. Each one keeps this video and the channel as a whole from getting lost in the YouTube shadow realm. So believe me, it helps. And you may have noticed, no sponsor today. So I'm going to be doing something a little bit different in this video. At the end, I'm going to be giving my opinion and grade for the STL. For now, let's get back to work. The time has come to tackle the main focus of the project, the Demogorgons. And just because it's easier to handle, I'm going to start with this smaller one. To get it going, I'll need a solid base of crimson. A long bristle brush here will give you a bit of an easier time to get in the deeper and harder to reach areas. If a touch of black remains in the deepest spots, it should be fine. Just do your best to catch everything. Next, to add a bit more flesh tone, tiger's eye. I'm using a medium dry brush to build this up on all the high points while keeping the crimson safe in the deeper details. This is pretty easy so long as you keep your eye on your paint load. So just keep it in mind, it's better to have a bit less paint on your brush and have it take a couple of seconds longer than to have too much and flood out all those cool shadows. Now, I want to take this highlight just a step further using Jasper. This step is really going to need a super light touch. The idea is to lay this down onto the tiger's eye without completely covering it up. So once again, you want to go a bit lighter than you think you have to and let it build up slowly for you. With everything dry, I gave it an all-over wash of some thinned down red tone. If you were a touch heavy-handed with the highlights before, this will help marry everything together while reinforcing the red tones in the shadows. Just be careful to watch for pooling. Finally, amber skin will be the final highlight via super light dry brush. And I do mean super light. Because this is such a bright tone, it'll very quickly lighten up the entire model and create very sophisticated, high contrast skin textures, which is kind of perfect for a horror statue like this. Remember, the key is to have a light touch with a low paint load so you'll have enough control to build these layers in balance with each other. Just be ready to slam on those brakes when it looks great. Now, we just have to repeat the process on the big one. Same steps, just a little more fiddly because of the size of it. Crimson base, tiger's eye and jasper for the fleshiness, then an all-over red wash, and amber skin over it. But the amber skin won't be the last stop as I pulled out quartz for the final highlight. I want this taller demon to be slightly lighter than the smaller one, almost as if they get paler as they age. And since this is such a light final touch, it won't take much time before it's looking its best. Now let's get black in here and give these nails a once over. Just don't forget about the nails on the little puppers too. Since the black is out, it's a good opportunity to reset these chains, after which I'll light dry brush a gunmetal while chrome them up to some nice iron shackles. Using a short stiffle brush here will give you tons of control and confidence that you're not going to overspill on the skin. With the restraints done, it's time to get intimate with Smiley here. My first goal is to build up the reds in the flesh with Wyvern Fury. Using a stipple here makes it pretty trivial to blush up the center hole and the majority of the petals, even with all the teeth in the way. Stabby stabby pokey pokey, and it's done. Stage 2 moves up to pure red. Again, stabby stabby this in, focusing it towards the center of each petal. Just be sure to limit this to only about 60% of the area of the previous color. It'll pretty quickly start to develop an eerie glow. The final stage is with Raging Rose. This should be reserved to the very tight centers of the petals and the raised up lips of the horror hole. Is that okay to call that? I'm calling it a horror hole. It's a horror hole from now on. But I digress. The most important thing to remember is that this is a less is more step. Going too much with this will start making everything look pink. Now it's time for the teeth. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. This is the most tedious and least enjoyable part of this project, because teeth like this are pretty much cones, and cones are a giant pain to paint, especially this tight together sitting just above a surface that we just finished. Best advice, paint them from the base up to the tip and watch your paint load. Doing these two things will help keep that flesh free of any stray paint. And if there ever was a point to throw on a movie, this is it. I went with Tank Girl. Absolute classic. With the teeth nice and chompy, our old friend Blood for the Blood God is here to really push the horror. But this comes with a bit of a twist. After the blood gets tapped in, a clean wet brush like this can clear the excess blood from the teeth. I'm not looking for them perfectly clean, but just a nice balance. I didn't spend all that time during Tank Girl painting them for them not to be seen. Now, I could call it done here, but my client wants a bit of blood spatter to up the gore value a bit. So I pulled out my secret weapon when it comes to splatter, the humble straw. If you overload a brush like this with some Blood God and then give it a good hard blow, you'll notice a nice random speckling of blood. The further you are from the target surface, the smaller the flecks will be over a wider area. I find about 2 to 3 inches is about the butter zone. So all in all, it's super simple to do, but filming it at the same time has its difficulties. Nevertheless, just a few blasts of blood and this project is officially done. And holy manufactured 80s nostalgia, this came out great. I have no doubt my client is gonna love adding this to their shelf. Now, I mentioned since this wasn't a sponsored post, I'm gonna do an STL review. So let's start with the pros. This is a good sized statue, being large enough to be impressive without being too big to put on a shelf. Also, the cuts are pretty good to make this printable on most printers. The Demogorgons look screen accurate without any obvious missteps. It has a pretty nice figure to base ratio and plenty of props to reference the show. As for cons, the base does feel a bit cluttered with so many extra bits, so things like the tire just kind of feel jammed in there to the point all you can really see is the tire tread. And staying on the base, I really wish it had at least the option of a nameplate. While I get the idea of having a clean look without branding, when a statue is tied to an IP, having a title there kind of puts a bow on it. Finally, while I do like the ratio of figure to base, I feel the lower gore sections should have been a little bit wider. As it stands now, the rock sitting on top nearly covers it all. All summed up, I'd give this STL a grade of B. Definitely above average, with room for improvement. With that out of the way, I have to get cracking on the next project so it doesn't take me 3 weeks to get it done. So this will have to be goodbye. And as always, thank you for watching, stay creative, and always enjoy the process.